Good day. My name is Robert Magee. I work at SideFX Software, and I'm here today to talk about the top 10 reasons for virtual production artists to learn Houdini. So, virtual production is a new way of making movies that integrate live action and computer graphics together. That's got some really exciting opportunities, and I'm going to talk today about a little overview of what it is, in case you haven't encountered it before, and then talk about how Houdini is able to contribute into that process and why Houdini skills are a worthwhile addition to your tool set when you're doing this kind of work. So traditionally, in a computer graphics heavy project, the actors would be filmed against green screens. Looking through the camera, there's the actor set up against the green screen, and then that live action shot is put up against a VFX environment or a CG environment, and effects are either added in front or behind of that. And that are composited together to get the final result. So this methodology has worked for years. It does have some pros and some cons. Some of the issues that come up are things like actors can often feel lost in a sea of green. You know, you'll often hear actors talk with some frustration in this kind of environment. It's also harder for the director to envision the final shot. They're filming with the green, and they have to, in their mind, put the concept art there. I mean, sometimes on set, they'll try to composite it quickly to give the director an idea, and I think they've gotten better and better at it over the years. But it still is a disconnect, a sort of a two-stage process as opposed to an integrated process. The other thing is that CG elements end up getting lit by CG artists. So you've got the traditional lighters lighting the actors, and then you've got CG artists lighting the background. And so instead of sort of one mind thinking about both, you've got two people, and that again creates a potential disconnect. The other thing is that reflective surfaces will pick up potentially the green, and also could pick up other, just the lighting of the environment. Ultimately, you'll have to play tricks to get those things to integrate together better. And often what will happen is you'll end up getting CG replacements done to fix those kinds of problems down the line. So it's sort of a fiddly process and not ideal. So with a virtual production workflow, what happens is you've got the volume or the wall. And in that volume is a real-time representation of your digital set. Super realistic, so that it can actually function as the background of your characters, and you can actually film the two together as one. And of course, we're looking at projects like The Mandalorian, which used a lot of this. That's the kind of project that has benefited over the recent years on this kind of technology. Now, one of the ways of feeding the volume is Unreal has virtual production tools, so they can feed that volume so that your camera can work with your background, and all of that can be integrated into a singular experience. Now, to feed that volume, Houdini can play an important role of feeding Unreal, and in feeding Unreal, getting assets up into the volume in a way that's perfect for production. So just some of the benefits of going with a virtual production workflow. One is actors have a more immersive experience. I mentioned The Mandalorian. If you watch one of the documentaries they have on that project, the actors talk about how much easier it is when you see the background and you're integrated into that environment, and how that inspires them for their performance. Also, traditional lighters can participate in lighting the whole shot. So now you'll have traditional lighters on set lighting the actors, and at the same time, they can work with the virtual production artist to light the background so that everything works in a cohesive manner. So there's a much better experience there as well. Also, light from the wall can help illuminate the actors. So if there's a blinking red light off to one side, that's going to show up on the actor because of the wall illuminating them. And that would also deal with things like reflections and so on as well. So definitely a better integration. You also can do pre-lighting and camera tests as you move through production. So you can bring a roughed out version of the set, put it on the wall, get some stand-in actors, check everything out. And of course, if things aren't working right, the director can say, well, I want that top building to be bigger, and I want this over here, and that's distracting, get rid of that. Those decisions can be made as you work through and prepare, but they're being made through the camera lens, which is ideal for a filmmaker. Now, one of the things that is a bit of an issue with this process right now is that there is a bit of blending needed between where the wall hits the ground and where the wall hits potentially the sky. And so generally what happens today is there's a goal of about 80% of what you record on screen should make it to final, and maybe about 20% will require cleanup. That's sort of what, some studios that I've seen present have talked about that being their goal at the moment. Obviously, as time goes by and the technology improves, we'll see maybe more of it going directly to final. But the key is that's certainly completely different than the green screen, where 90% of it had to be sort of filled in or replaced later on in the process. So in Toronto, Pixelmondo is a company that's got a lot of experience working with the wall. They work with Unreal as well, and they gave me some nice images here to sort of make it a little more realistic representation for you of what this is. So here's the virtual production sort of station where they've got Unreal and they're feeding the wall with information. Here's one of these digital sets, a lot of realistic data in there. Here is sort of right in the middle of the set with the camera. You've got the actors and the environment, that they can react to. So better experience for them. And again, more actors right in a more immersive environment. Here you see that they've extended some of the screens up into the roof area, so that might limit how much blending they have to do in that area, but definitely. And of course it looks weird at this angle, but through the camera all of that would line up and look perfect. Now, Pixelmondo has, in response to their growth of this technology within their studio, they've created a virtual production academy where you can go and work on Unreal. They're going to be adding some courses with Houdini as well, and you can learn about this new way of working. And in addition, we've got two schools talking today. Well, we've got NYU talking about virtual production later today, and Monica Hinden from Vinyl Pixel is going to talk about virtual production as well. So if you stick around, you're going to learn a lot about this topic because it's becoming more and more important within the industry. And there we go. So, 10 reasons. Why should a virtual production artist think of Houdini as part of their tool set? Well, the number one reason to think about Houdini at all is, of course, the benefit of going procedural. By going procedural, you actually can look at your goals and say, well, what do I want to do as a virtual production artist? Build a compelling set. I want to be able to art direct everything, and I want real-time assets. And some of my challenges are repetitive tasks can consume time. Larger environments can overwhelm my teams, and last-minute changes are costly. Well, these are all things that can be addressed with a procedural approach because you can work faster, more efficiently, you can make changes deep into production, and we're going to go through how Houdini does that, and you'll see those benefits. So at the core, Houdini does this because you're working with nodes, networks, and assets. Nodes store your creative decisions. Networks create a flow of data that connects those together to create a result. You might think of this as a little pipeline in a box. It's like a recipe written down, ready to go. And then assets allow you to take that recipe and collapse it into a single node or a single tool and share that with other people. From a production point of view, that means one person solves the problem and other people benefit from that solution within production. And this allows them to feed a larger pipeline with higher level tools. So here's an example of that environment we showed earlier, and we're going to talk about the cables and how the cable tool was created. So this is sped up. There actually is a tutorial of this on our website if you want to watch it in normal time. But the basic idea is here, there's a node for the line. We get to resample the line. We're going to sweep that line to get 6 lines or a bunch of lines, 8 lines. Then we're going to put in some randomization with a mountain node to sort of knock that off. One of the things that's great about Houdini is it's very easy to add in natural looking sort of randomization so that things don't look too computer generated. They start to look much more organic. And Houdini allows you to do that kind of thing right at the beginning as you build up these networks. Now this is going to go even further to create some realism. Always you're looking in a procedural solution, how can I do something that will give me a realistic result without me having to do it by hand? So in this case, they're looking at the relationship, the rest length between the different points on this curve, and then using that to determine the radius of the tube. So as you move this around, you see how the cables come in different radius, because that's done procedurally. And so it's done procedurally. It's built into the tool. You don't have to manage that by hand. You don't have to tweak parameters for each cable. That's sort of sorted out. Now we're going to say, well, obviously we want this thing to droop, but instead of doing it by hand, modeling that by hand, let's use a vellum simulation. Let's actually simulate the drooping of that. We got to anchor the points on the two ends, and of course you can procedurally find those easily, no matter how long your curve is or what's going on there. And then once you've got that, you can run a simulation and get that drooping. Then you can go back to your curves and say, well, let's wrap other curves around the initial curves. And once we've got that, so this will create secondary curves that we'll then be able to add into the solution. So this is one thing that's really nice about Houdini as well, is you can start to prototype an idea, have a simple solution, and then just start to layer in levels of complexity to take it to another level. And you'll see very soon as we go to simulate this, that this is already looking quite organic and really nice, and ready to go in sort of more of a production scenario. So, you know, this is the way that Houdini takes this, builds up this network of nodes, and there we go. We've got our recipe ready to go. So, we got the recipe. We talked about assets, where I can now share that recipe with other people. So I take my network of nodes, I collapse that into a single node called an HDA, or Houdini Digital Asset. And I build an interface for it. Now this is not done using coding. This is done by taking actual parameters inside on these nodes inside and just dragging them up. So an artist can do this. You don't need a developer or programmer or R&D to do this. You can do this as an artist. Promote those parameters, build yourself a high-level interface, and then other things can be added too. You can add scripts, handles, embedded geometry. So, you know, if you want a certain piece of geometry, rather than have to reference it off disk, you can actually store that inside the digital asset. So as you share the asset around, references are not being broken. Now, once you finish, you can take that and it becomes a tool that works with Houdini just like any other tool. Now, what's interesting is our developers create many of their tools. The tools you use in Houdini every day, they're actually built using Houdini digital assets. And there's a couple benefits to this. One is you can actually dive down and see how they did it. Secondly, it allows them to create higher level more artist-friendly tools out of the lower level, more complicated nodes that they maybe don't want you to have to look at all the time. So we do it ourselves when we make tools for you. What's neat about this, though, is studios can make tools for themselves. Later we're going to learn about SideFX labs where we have TDs making tools for the community, and so on and so forth. So this tool building process, this assetization of these little formulas is pretty exciting. And that high-level interface that we built is available as the interface for that node when you're working within Houdini. So here, let's do that with this cable tool. So we're going to go in, take all those nodes, and we're going to wrap them into a single node, and then we're going to turn that into a digital asset. Give it a name, version number, and save that out. Now, once you've got that, it has no interface, so we got to build that. Let's make sure we got an output to that, and then we're going to go and we're going to set in the minimum number, or the number of inputs. So we're going to have 2 inputs. Now, what are those inputs going to be used for? We're going to use one of them for the curve that feeds into there. And the second one is going to be for a piece of geometry that we use for collision to collide the cables to. So here we're just going to temporarily put a box in there, and as we run that, you'll see that everything is colliding with that box. And the line is the single line we have there. So the line and the box sit outside the asset, because when we work with this later, when we hand it to an artist, the artist is going to plug their own line in, they're going to plug their own geometry in, and get the cable that they want. So here we are building the interface, and so all we're doing is taking parameters from inside the network and promoting them up. And if we go forward in time, you've got a nice interface here with all the tools needed. And of course, what's exciting about this is it means that every time an artist uses this tool, they're going to have the potential to create a unique result. One of the fears of something like a procedural solution is that it's going to look repetitive. It's going to look the same. Everything's going to look the same. But with Houdini, you can layer in so much sophistication and so much variety that a single tool can give you infinite number of results. So the next reason why Houdini is good for virtual production artists ties with our connection to Unreal, which is, we learned earlier, is one of the things that feeds the volume. So we've got a digital asset that we wrapped up, and we want to take that into Unreal. Well, it's a totally separate application. How's that going to be possible? Well, what we did was we created a technology called Houdini Engine. And Houdini Engine is an API that allows us to plug into a host application like Unreal. And then when an asset is loaded, we go down and we use the Houdini libraries to cook the results and deliver them to the host application. Then that high-level interface that we made available with that asset, that interface is available to you in Unreal. So Unreal artists can use this asset as if it's a part of Unreal. They don't even have to know Houdini's involved. They play with the parameters, make changes, and under the hood, everything gets changed and recooked, and the results sent to Unreal. This also works in other applications. We have plugins for Maya, 3D Studio Max, Unity, and Unreal. And with the API, you could write a plugin for any application that you need that's available. So here we are in Unreal, and we're going to bring that cable tool in. So this is Unreal 4, because that's when we managed to record it just before switch to 5. So we're going to use a curve input within Unreal. So you put the curve input in, and then you just press the Alt key. You move these things around, and then you press the Alt key to get this little curve here. And all the controls that we had before are here. So we're going to let it fall. It's not colliding with anything. So we're going to get a geometry input and pick all this geometry and resim, and now it's falling on the ground. But we're getting this bulging that's going on in certain parts, and that sort of doesn't make sense. So the other technology interconnection we have with Unreal is something called Session Sync, where it can take my existing session that I'm working on in Unreal and plop it into Houdini. So we're getting all the elements, and we can debug it. We can say, well, what's this happening? Why is this going on? And then that'll allow us to update the asset and get a better result sent back to Unreal. So we go into here, and what we find is, remember we did that rest length, and what's happening is at the corners where we're getting these hard edge corners, that rest length is forcing some of the p-scales to get bigger in those areas. So what we need to do is first add more points into there, and then also we're going to take that and smooth that out. So it's a subdivision curve. So now the points, the rest length are going to be even. We don't have that problem. Once we get that set up, we just tinker, get the asset doing what it wants, and then we sync that back up with what's going on in Unreal. And all the changes get saved into the asset. So the asset is now improved and can be deployed to the wider team with the problem solved. And there we go. So now we can move that around and update, and everything's fine with no bulging going on. So Session Sync is another great way that we connect in with Unreal. And then, of course, you can do things like, assign materials. And there's two ways to assign materials. One is you just do it later. But the other option is you can actually assign it inside the asset. So if there's a particular material you want to put on the cables, just get its Unreal path and assign it inside the asset. And then automatically, when the asset gets put into Unreal, those assignments are set and ready to go. So you can put the artist in a position where they use this tool and they don't have to do anything because the work's all done for them. It's ready to go. So here's an example more in context. So imagine this is a virtual production background. This is more of a gaming environment, but let's, if you added a little more realism to it, you could have that as a virtual background. And the director says, I want some cables in here. So you bring the asset in and you move it around. Now, when I talked to Pixamundo about their project, they're mainly using Houdini for optimization right now. They're not using procedural assets like this on set in the same way, but they said that's certainly something they're exploring And this is the kind of thing that at the Virtual Academy, they're going to start teaching how to use procedural assets in that kind of an environment. Okay, so with what we've learned so far, we get a real big benefit. Another reason why you should learn Houdini, which is artists get to build their own tools. Often in production, you go to the R&D team. Can you solve this problem for me? Can you solve that problem for me? You can solve your own problems. With Houdini, get it working and publish those to your team. So what are the benefits of making your own tools? Well, you get more creative control. It's easier to iterate because you can create a tool, test it, go back, make changes, get it ready. And it also allows for scalability. So you can have a tool that solves a little problem, and just by adding more nodes, get that same workflow to potentially solve a bigger problem, or to create a bigger environment, or to make more trees. And one of the other big benefits is ultimately when you finish and you've got these live assets inside Unreal, you can make changes deep into production. Oh, I've got a building. Let's make that building a little shorter. Let's make that cable a little longer. That becomes possible when you take this approach. And the pipeline benefits are that you can have optimization built in. So if you have specific needs in the volume of polygon count or something, you can put poly reduction nodes and things like that right inside your network, so that what comes out at the other end is as efficient as possible. And does everything you need. The materials are assigned properly, the geometry is doing what it needs. All of that can be built in because you built your own tool and you gave it the features that it needed. And this allows you to create more with smaller teams, because you can have one person or a couple people building tools, and then artists using those tools and in a more effective way. And there's a nice dialogue back there. You know, you could have a tool that populates a whole forest with trees. Well, that could have been a lot of work. And actually, even those cables, like imagine going to a modeling team and saying, I need cables that are drooping from here to here to here. Okay, go model that, and then come back a couple days later and go, no, I need to. This kind of tool is going to be much more valuable for that. So here's just some other examples of these kinds of tools that you could create in this kind of environment. So these again are digital assets inside Unreal with Houdini Engine under the surface, updating every time a change is made. So here's just a railing being put in, and you can update it no problem. It's already got built in some Unreal shaders. These are animated ones in this case. Here's an interesting one. So we want to populate this little barge with a bunch of boxes. Well, we could do that by hand and move a bunch of boxes in, but instead we've got a tool where we can go in and say, in this area here, I want boxes. So you assign that box to the asset. You've got the asset coming in, and just make sure everything's plugged in properly. And then there we go. And underneath the white box, if we hide the white box, it's all populated. So this is where I talk about repetitive tasks. Instead of doing this task over and over and over again within the scene, you can have a tool that does a lot of that work in an efficient, organic, artistic way and get great results without chewing up time and resources. There's assets for doing building. So if you're building a digital environment, you can have assets where you just block out what you want the building to be, and then a digital asset can convert that into a building with windows and doors, and then you'll have sliders for deciding, well, how many windows do I want? Where do I want the windows to be? Where's my main entrance? What kind of roof do I want? So again, these kinds of assets can be set up to work in that environment. And you get exactly what you need, and it fits the needs of your project because, again, this is an artist-built tool, so it's not just a generic building tool, it's the kind of building tool that you need for your project because you participated in that. And this one's a fun one. This is actually scaffolding. Again, be a very difficult modeling exercise if every time you wanted to make scaffolding, you had to model it from scratch. But here with the procedural solution, again, just move some sliders, get it out, make it longer, make it taller, whatever you need. Or again, put down, block it out, and then fill that blocked out shape with the asset. And this is the kind of thing later when you're in the virtual production volume, you could have a director saying, hey, can I have a scaffolding over there? And, that's not quite right. Yeah, taller, that's perfect. So creative decisions can be made with these kinds of procedural assets. So, I'm not sure in virtual production they're taking full advantage of this kind of ability of Houdini, but I think as time goes by, it will be a very logical decision for this to be part of that picture. And here's some ivy be put on a post. And of course, we know that this is a logical choice because Houdini is being used in game engines for games to do environments, whole towns, whole landscapes, so that skill set. And of course, one of the interesting things we're going to talk about later is how skill sets within the industry often hop. So, VFX artists go, well, hey, I'm going to go work in games. And then they go, oh, I'm going to go back and work on virtual production and bring those skills and that skill set with me. So we'll definitely see some of these skills moving between these different worlds. Okay, so the next benefit of Houdini is something called labs, SideFX Labs tools. So if you go to our website on the product menu, you can go to SideFX Labs page, and there's a whole bunch of tools. There's over hundreds of them now. And you can learn about them through their documentation. You can also go to there's an ArtStation page where they're featured, and they have a roadmap where you can find out what assets have recently been released, as well as which ones are in progress, and you can actually suggest ones for yourself. So what are these tools? Well, essentially what happens is we have some people at SideFX that are technical directors that have worked in production, and they help take our lower level tools and build a higher level, more artist-friendly solution for them. So they've done things like integration of apps like capture apps or landscaped apps, other apps in the industry that we need connections to. They'll help write those connections and get those things working. They'll also just create specific tools to solve specific problems. And these tools are, again, very high level, solve a particular problem and get that done. So, here's an example of bringing in Mapbox data. So you can bring that in and visualize it within Houdini. You can look at it from a couple different points of view. Here's Mapbox with OSM data. In this case, buildings as well as landscapes, and starting to set that out. So, these are just, once these are set up, it's a tool to just go and get the information, bring it in, and you're ready to go. So, you could have done it before by outputting with a certain format, importing, doing this, doing that, but these SideFX Labs tools will streamline that workflow, make it much faster, much easier. We have a whole bunch of tree tools available within SideFX Labs. So if you're doing an environment, you have access to tools to build up trees. You can see you can use a whole bunch of different, it's like a tool set, and you plug them in a certain way and you get yourself the result that you need. You can also use the tree tools for other kinds of plant life as well. This is a funny tool that's in SideFX Lab, it's a rope tool. So you can easily wrap objects with rope. And so here we see the tool, and you just cut planes through your geometry that you want to wrap, and it will add the rope. And if you've done more than one of them, it'll wrap the rope around the rope and get the right result. So again, hyper-specific as a tool, this might actually be more of an example that you might use to learn how to make a tool. But if you have a particular situation where you're trying to solve this problem, there's a tool ready to go. And this is why we say if you want to suggest tools, maybe there's a very specific problem that you want to see solved, SideFX Lab team can maybe take that up and help with that. Another thing that Houdini can do, and this is probably the thing that it's used most for right now in a virtual production environment, which is to take models and geometry and optimize it so that it can go into the volume with Unreal. So this could be scanned in data, like the mushrooms. So here we have a model, and that model was brought in through Alice Vision and taken through a number of steps to clean it up, get it ready for Unreal, and then spit it out as either an OBJ or an FBX. So here's the network, and if we just walk through that network, I think I need to click one more. There we go. So there's the original model. That's the SideFX Labs tool that's bringing in all these images and turning it into geometry using Alice Vision as an outside technology running through the asset. It gets then transformed and moved into place. Things are clipped. Delete small parts is a SideFX Labs tool that cleans it up even further. Then you can use Houdini's native poly reduction tools to say, well, how do I optimize this and get this ready to go? And then you can also have a little side network if you need to bake in some of the high-level details back in as a normal map. That can be done as well. And here we see there's some specific needs that Unreal has, triangulating it, setting up normals, scaling it so it fits into Unreal, because I think we're 100 times off. And then you're ready to export. So this kind of optimization is something that Houdini can do really well, and for the virtual production volume, this is critical that your assets meet those needs. And these highly realistic sort of scanned-in assets, they need to go through. They need to go through that kind of process. Which brings us to another interesting idea in Houdini: PDG. PDG is automation made easy, and what it essentially allows you to do is, instead of right now when you do something in Houdini, you've got a node network, and it's got to process that whole node network. And if you're asking it to do a lot, that can take time. So PDG leads to a solution to that problem. So instead of doing it directly in a normal node network, you can bring some of those processes over into PDG. And each PDG node will take it and break it down into a number of tasks and say, well, okay, I've got to do this many things. A scheduler is then set up that says, well, I'm going to assign those tasks to some of the processors on your computer. This is a local scheduler. So you'll see that I've got 7 processes are finished, 3 are on the go, and there's 70 in the queue waiting. But you could also say, you know what, no, assign 11 of my cores on my machine instead. And now it's going to motor through it a little bit faster, because now you're doing 11 at a time, and you're going to get there faster. But of course, most people's computers aren't going to scale up beyond that. So what you do instead is you switch to a deadline scheduler, and you go to the farm or the cloud. Now you can have 50 tasks being processed at a moment, and therefore what you're doing runs even faster than that. So PDG allows you to really leverage the compute cloud to get a really powerful result. So we're going to go back to the local scheduler and just show you a simple example of this, because this allows you to understand what we're talking about here. So the first thing is we have a node that says, go get some files on disk. There's a folder, it's got 4 files in it, and you process it and say, okay, well, there's the 4 files on disk. Now what we want to do is we want to use a digital asset. So I have a digital asset called Brickify, which turns this into like Lego brick version of the model. So let's process that. We click, click, click. There we go. We've got Lego versions of that. Now, they're all using the same texture map, and what we want to do is go to another folder and bring in a bunch of texture maps for each particular model. They sort of correspond to the different models. What we can then do is partition them in a way where they work together. And now when we process this one, you'll see that not only we get the models, but there's a second line called an input.1, and that one we're going to use here. Now, it doesn't work automatically. What we need to do is go to that texture map there and go at PDG input.1, and that's where all the texture maps are. Now when we process it, you'll see that each of these models has a unique texture map because it was able to go into the folder, pick up the right files, and assign it in. Now we can go further. We can say, well, you know what, I need thumbnails of all these. So once I brickify them, I need somebody to review them and make sure they like the results. So at the bottom of the network, we set up a node for rendering and render them out. But we don't really want to see them as individual. They're good that way, but what we really want to do is create a mosaic using image magic, and that will combine them together to create a combined image of them. So again, all of this is stuff that you could be doing by hands, but if you set it up as a network like this, you can process it. So if that folder, instead of containing 4 models, it contained a bunch of models, you'd be able to handle it. If it was more models, you'd be able to handle it. If it was more models, you'd be able to handle it. And all of this can be processed on a farm or a cloud to get the most efficient result possible. So PDG is definitely a technology that can automate things. So think about earlier, we had the the optimization of that model from the Alice vision. Imagine if that was in here, and I could go to a folder with tons of these examples and just say, run through them all and give me the models, instead of an artist sitting there doing them one by one by one by one by one. Maybe 80–90% of them work out perfectly, and just put them right into production. Other ones might need some hand care, but generally speaking, the ability to automate like this can make a huge difference. And that's something Houdini offers right now today. So inside the volume, you have your backgrounds, you have your environments, but you might also have some real-time effects. Maybe there's a fire or an explosion, something happening in the volume, something that allows the actors to respond and react. So instead of putting that in post-production, that can happen within the volume. And of course, Unreal's doing a lot to create effects as a key part of their their tool set, and Houdini can feed that really, really well. So here we have just an explosion that we would render out, and then this can be brought in as sort of a card. So here this is brought into Unreal, where now you can actually play with lighting and get the lighting to integrate with what you're doing. And then here's a result that's fairly realistic that's attached to this plane. If the plane was moving, it'd be more realistic, but essentially you can see how realistic that explosion can look inside the Unreal environment. Here's some fire and smoke put into an environment that could easily work as a background of a scene. And remember, I talked about whether if this is in the volume, those smoke and fire could be like actually adding illumination onto the actors, and the actors could be feeding off of that. And then this is from a technology called Vertex Animation Texture. You should go do some tutorials on it, because I'm not going to get into a big explanation of it. But essentially, you create a texture map that holds the animation for all the points of a model, so you can start to do some really sophisticated things in real time that would have been prohibitive in the past. And actually, the SideFX Labs tools that are used to create this have really gone in and solved particular issues that were with this technology. So with the SideFX Labs tools, you get really quality results for this kind of real-time effect. Now this is more gamer-like, but it shows sort of integration of real-time effects. This is all published out of Unreal. Smoke, fire, destruction, all of that sort of in there. And yeah, here's another one with some fire and smoke. And now Solaris. We can get back to that. I'll actually have some slides for you. So Solaris is a gateway to USD. So let's find out what USD is and what that means. So Solaris is a context within Houdini called LOPS, and it's a context that's built around USD. USD is called the Universal Scene Description. It is created by Pixar as an open source initiative, and it is quickly gaining ground within the industry as a way of moving files and sharing files and generally managing assets within a pipeline. It's got very strong tools for referencing, as well as instancing tools to create efficient environments. Now, how does this affect virtual production? Well, not so much today, because while Unreal does ingest USD and starting to work with it, I've heard that artists aren't able to do enough within Unreal to work with those assets for it to be a realistic solution today. But they are, I mean, even from 5.0 to 5.1 of Unreal, things have improved. So over time, USD could very well be the main source of assets going through a pipeline into Unreal, especially if you're doing visual effects work where those same assets could be going to the lighting department, or they could be going to other departments as well. And what's this got to do with Houdini? Well, because we've created this environment called Solaris, we've created very artist-friendly ways of working with USD. Otherwise, USD is just little text. You know, you've got to type out the text and so on. So having a tool, a high-level tool that artists can work with, is a big deal. So what happens in USD is everything is broken down. So there's a lot of referencing and cross-referencing. So I have a shot. In that shot is my layout, which is a separate file. In that file are all my assets. I have an animation file with a couple characters that they're brought in. and then I have effects, and I have lighting. So all these things can be worked on, saved out as separate files, and then combined or composited. Some people like to say that USD is a little bit like Photoshop for 3D in the way that it layers, and you have one layer sit on top of another layer, and there's all sorts of funny rules which we're not going to get into today, but they really allow you to composite these things in exciting ways. If I'm creating a second shot, you'll see that I can be pulling in the same USD file for layout and maybe the same USD file for lighting, but maybe my animation, my effects are a little bit different. So there's the ability to share this kind of stuff and make changes and updates is huge from a production point of view, and it's becoming a friendly way to do all that. So this is actually a scene created in Houdini using Solaris as an environment, and it was created by an artist, Adrian Lampert, who actually, I'm going to show you later, he published it as a tutorial. So if you want to learn about this is a great tutorial where he has a whole bunch of information and about setting up this kind of sophisticated environment using USD, and then at the end he actually takes it into Unreal, and you can see his observations on that. So this one I'm going to motor, this is just, the video is going to just motor through just to give you a sense of what's going on, but these are actually Megascan assets that are brought into Houdini, and then we're using something called the component builder to get them ready to spit out as USD. So you go in, you clean it up, you assign materials to it, you do what you need, you spit it out, and then you see there's a little gallery, layout gallery there. These assets then get put into that gallery. The materials, we use Material X now, which is another open source, so it's much easier to share these things amongst different programs. So those Material X materials can be created and assigned to that asset, and then you can begin to just test it within Houdini. We have a Karma renderer to test it out, make sure that it's working within our environment, but then later it can be sent off somewhere else. Because again, USD is a shared file format. It works with many different renders. It works in many different environments. So, it's a great place to start and so on. So here you see assets that he's created. He had assets that he actually had falling down with physics. Now he's got using the layout brushes within Houdini to sort of move these things around and set them up. And you can just drag and drop and place. These are more little test examples, but you can see how quickly you can start to lay things out. So Houdini is becoming, not only in this environment do we process the USD, but we have layout tools that allow you to do things in a very efficient way. So there's those little sticks that we're going to use physics to drop them to get a nice realistic result in terms of their layout. So instead of doing all that work by hand. Here we're going to set up the trees for this environment, or Adrian did, and in doing so he's instancing to the landscape directly, and then he can paint where he wants trees and where he doesn't want trees, and then have that update accordingly. So there's efficiencies in this process where USD is going to become the solution in the future, and so since many of you are students, it is definitely a skill set you want to add to your list, because USD is going to play an important role in many different aspects of the industry, but certainly I can see virtual production benefiting from it as well. Here we see another landscape, again just populating with trees. This is getting closer and closer to his final shot. I think what we were looking at before were more little test examples. And in addition to doing layout, look dev with the materials, a big part of the Solaris environment is also lighting. And you set up those lights. And one of the things with USD is cameras and lights are part of the USD description. So you set up your camera, you set up your light, and you send that off to the next place. They get that camera, they get those lights, and they can be used in that situation. So it's a real pipeline, friendly, encompassing sort of solution. And here we have all these elements. Sorry, it's going too fast. I didn't want it to go too long, but I thought it was important to see all the different parts of what was going on here. Again, there's a tutorial available. You can see all of that. And here we are getting closer. We're getting some lighting, lighting that up. And right now he's doing that in Karma, checking out different options. And yeah, it's a nice creative environment for this kind of very sophisticated work. And there's Adrian. And here it is him testing it on Unreal. So he's imported it in, and he's you'll have to watch his video. He has some observations about it, what works, what he's looking forward to in future releases of Unreal. But yeah, you can definitely bring that in. And here's his tutorial on the website. So forest trail creation with Solaris. I encourage you to look at it. I've actually seen some people comment on it that it's helped them understand USD a lot better because of the way it, because it's a deep sort of production example. So it's a good example to look at. Here's another example, again with some high-level assets. Here it is in Houdini. Here it is in Unreal. And this is all part of a talk that you can see tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peter Arcara will take you through at a much slower, manageable pace how to work with this in Unreal. Start with Houdini and go to Unreal. So if you're interested in this topic, be sure to come back tomorrow for that. So my last 2 points here are more about what can Houdini do for you as a virtual production artist. And one of the things is it allows you to discover a richer career path. Over the years, I've noticed a lot of Houdini artists that they're coveted because of certain things, like their ability to think procedurally is a valuable skill that a lot of studios like. Pixar uses Houdini a lot now, but there was a point where they were not using Houdini, but they still put Houdini skills as a valuable thing on your resume because they knew those people could solve problems in a high level, really get into things. So just having that skill set is really going to benefit. Ability to solve challenging production issues, understanding low-level concepts and how to apply them to real-world problems, and understanding how to automate to build more efficient pipelines. So these are all Houdini skills that you can take with you in a whole bunch of different directions. So examples are obviously the traditional Houdini skill is VFX artist, technical director. You can certainly do that kind of thing. Virtual production artist, which is what we're talking about here today, well, those skills are transferable into that new world, especially as it connects through real time. And of course, the other thing about real time is game dev, virtual reality, visualization. People are using it to design environments for autonomous cars to train. And Houdini artists are getting jobs in a whole bunch of different places and ways. So all of these skills are definitely, for an individual, worth you learning because you can benefit from that. And the last reason why you want to learn it is because it's easier than people say it is. A lot of people talk about Houdini being overly complicated, but there's a whole path to learning Houdini that isn't overly daunting. And we've tried to encapsulate some of that on our website. We have a fairly comprehensive tutorial section with tons of tutorials. To help you filter that, we have learning paths where you can focus on a particular topic with tutorials for that particular topic. And we also allow you to bookmark tutorials so that you can create your own My Learning page. And on that page, any tutorial that's in progress or that you completed will be properly marked, and you can essentially build your own course out of the courses that we make available. So that's pretty exciting. We also have the content library. Now this is a place where we upload scene files, digital assets, texture maps, a whole bunch of different things. And these can be downloaded and explored. So they're definitely there for learning purposes, but sometimes they can be used in production. For instance, files in here, you might download them, make a few little adjustments, and boom, go off and use them in your project. For instance, the muscle and tissue example there, we know of studios that when they got access to that particular example, were able to swap that in quickly and get that into a production result. So that's pretty exciting. So we try to make as much available in that situation as possible. And then, of course, we've also done a few tech demos. And if you go to the Learn menu, Tech Demos, Project Titan is there. And as you saw, we saw a lot of Project Titan throughout this talk. It is a comprehensive whole bunch of tools. You can see what the tools do, understand the project, listen to the artist talk about creating the project. And then there's about 10 to 12 tutorials on how to make each and every asset from scratch, like the cable tool and the pipe tool and so on and so forth. There's a lot of learning in there that's pretty exciting. And because it's a project-based learning, you really understand the context of it and how that works. So there we go. 10 reasons why virtual production artists should consider Houdini skills as part of their ultimate tool set. And I hope I've been able to illuminate you on some of those exciting possibilities, and hope you enjoy the other presentations later today to learn how other people are dealing with this part of the pipeline. So thank you very much. Thanks for joining us here today.
And does anyone have any questions for Rob? Or virtual production questions in general? Okay, sure.
Thank you. That was really good, Rob.
Oh.
In the virtual production set, how do they match the lighting, the real lights on the stage and the background LED?
Well,
screen?
because they have through Unreal, they have a live version of the set
Right.
in Unreal.
Right.
So they can sit there and say, well, turn that light up and turn that light down. And I think what the advantage of doing it that way is you see the two of them through the camera at the same time. So you can say, well, take the real light and make it stronger, and take the virtual light.
So they
and make
eyeball it
Well, they
to
do.
match it?
Well, it's interesting because I watched Jon Favreau talk about this with his projects, because he did some of this stuff with The Lion King and so on. And he said having access to real lighters that could light a real set, and their ability to talk with the people doing the virtual lighting and making so they know how to do this instinctually. They have that skill set, and he felt that within this virtual environment, he was getting a more integrated, better result than when he splits it into.
So the virtual lighters and the real lighters got to work
They
together.
They work together.
That's
They're
cool.
right there on set,
Yeah.
And they connect with each other. So that's pretty exciting.
Other questions? Yeah, up here.
Thank you. Does this workflow also work with Houdini's like particle and grain system as well, moving it into Unreal, even though Unreal uses Niagara?
Well, we have through SideFX Labs a pathway to Niagara. So you can let Niagara do some of the work, or you can build up an effect just with Niagara, or you can use Houdini's tried and true tools for dealing with particles and effects and so on, build up a particle solution, and then get that into Unreal through Niagara. So there is a pathway for that.
And I can add to that, in fact, at 3:30, there is a presentation called Expanding Your Visuals from Houdini with Niagara.
Yeah.
So there you go. Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting that Unreal sees effects as a big part of what they're doing for games and for immersive environments in general. So, Houdini is a great place to refine the data, get it ready, pump it through that system, and they really work well together.
Questions? Other questions? Sure, right down here.
How long do you think it's going to take before USD becomes the main standard of moving between moving data from Houdini to Unreal?
Well, it's tough to say what the timeline is, but they seem to be moving relatively fast. I think one of the issues today is that when it's brought in, one of the things that's neat about USD is it sits on disk, so you can bring it in and it's there, but it doesn't have to be part of your layout within. It's just there. It's there. It's in the background. That's turning out to be the problem from a virtual production point of view. Is they don't want to just see it. They want to be able to interact with it, and they don't want it to do that right now. You have to break the USD aspect, basically import it in permanently. Then you lose the referencing, and they don't want to do that. So the artists are saying we need a way of acting on that. And of course, USD has built-in capabilities of that. The whole idea is if I bring in a scene and there's a chair, I shouldn't be able to get rid of the chair, but I can hide it, or I can move it, I can knock it down, and that gets layered in a separate USD file. So really all they need right now is a way of saying, well, I'm going to take this chair and put it down and just save that out in a separate USD file sort of for this scene. So I think, it's moving faster than we would have thought. Like even when we brought Solaris out, we thought, okay, it's going to take forever for studios to go through this process and start to integrate it in. No, we've got some customers just going nuts with it. And they're they're fully, I mean, this is more on the visual effects side, but they've embraced it a lot faster than we thought. And I think games companies are starting to seriously think about it, which means that Unreal will be part of that process. And virtual production in itself, if you can share assets between a VFX department and the virtual production department, there's going to be huge benefits there. So I think it might go faster than we think, but who knows? Maybe they'll hit a bit of a roadblock they got to get over.
And again, I can add to that if you're curious about the current state of how USD is being used. Tomorrow at 11, we have a presentation called Solaris and USD Workflows from Houdini for Unreal. So yeah, another question.
Now it's just a matter of stumping John to come up with it. Of course, that's not all right. When it comes to the proposals for labs tools, what's the normal process as a user? Well, I have an idea. Would I check Oddforce? Would I check the forums first?
No. If you go to this page that we have under Product SideFX Labs, there's a button there to some sort of, I forget what the name of it is. It's a board. What is it? Product board. So you go there, you go to the third tab, proposals, and you press plus and you make your proposal.
Gotcha. So if there is interest from a committee, I guess, at SideFX or within a community that works on labs to say this warrants development, but where would I even know to look? Like maybe this exists already.
Well, that's the idea, is that if people propose it, it goes on the list of proposed ones. So if you want to go in and add your comments saying, oh, this, I'd love this, but can you add this feature or do this? So it's meant to be a shared experience within the community. Now, obviously, we can only start working on it when somebody on our own team has that expertise for that particular area. But we're starting to have labs tools built by people outside of SideFX, and they've shown an interest in that. So if we don't have the skill set, it doesn't mean that we can't go find someone. And of course, just a few days ago, we announced the Tech Art Challenge, which is about building digital assets. It's sponsored by SideFX Labs, and we actually just hired somebody recently that came from that challenge. We met them through the challenge, and now they're on the team building assets for SideFX Labs. So it's a growing community, and it's through that board, there's a way to involve yourself and connect with people there.
Great, thanks.
You can also go right through the regular support channel, make a support ticket, say, whether that be for 2 or users.
Yeah.
And they'll direct it to the labs team.
Yeah.
The tutorials that you showed at the end there on the SideFX website, are those free to anyone, or do you need some sort of subscription?
Adrian's ones are free, and many of the ones on the website are free. There are the odd ones that are paid. So what we do is, anything we do is free. All the SideFX, the Titan ones are all free. But occasionally a customer will post one and they've decided they want $50 or $100 for it. So we point you to their site and then you go pay for it and so on there. But a lot of the material there is just free. We want you to be able to learn as much as possible on your own time and dive as deep as you want. So, and one of the things, sorry, I meant to say this earlier, is one of the reasons Houdini sometimes end up looking hard is because people go on YouTube and they find a tutorial, and the first tutorial they find is, let's go deep with Vex, and people are scripting and doing complicated things and so on. That's one side to Houdini, and it's a beautiful side, and people do amazing things. That's not all Houdini has to offer. And I think, the Project Titan examples are really good ones, because that's an artist mainly interacting with nodes and in the viewport and so on, and it's not programming. There's the odd script, but it's not sophisticated, crazy stuff. So there's the rocket scientist version of Houdini, but then there's Houdini artists that just need to get the job done. I met a couple artists one time. They worked on a production. I think they were doing a feathering system for a project, and there was only 2 of them, and they were like, we don't have a deep knowledge of this. We just got it to work, and it's working, and they basically did a whole movie full of birds all through what they learned. And then this was like decades ago when we had no tutorials. So I think there's lots of room to grow with your Houdini skill set without getting intimidated by the high level stuff. If you want to get into the fun stuff, Intagma is definitely a place to go, because they are really good at bridging the fun, friendly stuff, and okay, we're going to go nuts and do some complicated stuff.
Rob, maybe you can talk briefly about using HD as an artist, not even an Houdini artist.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was one of the things when we talked about building up networks and ultimately creating assets. Once you've got things wrapped up in a friendly, high-level asset, there are artists that can use Houdini that don't even have to, I mean, if you're in Unreal, you might not even know Houdini exists. It's just like, oh, here's a bunch of tools, go have fun with this. So digital assets really open the door for artists to potentially not worry about the complicated stuff and just get somebody else to pass them an asset that they can do. And we want to publish more and more assets so that that's happening, and so people can eventually get to a point where they can just enjoy the experience as an artist instead of having to worry about building up sophisticated systems. But,
Is that the actual bypass for Unreal Epic to have technology to just USD in a more open method in HTA?
I think.
Yeah, here.
Sorry, the question was
Okay.
about the fact that
Yeah.
do we need to wait for Unreal to get that integration? I think we do, because if, like, even the Houdini Engine plugin doesn't do anything to Unreal. It sort of sits off to the side. USD is so embedded in what the scene would be, it has to be done by them. I think if we tried to do it, it wouldn't be right. So I think we have to wait for them. But I mean, actually, we've got somebody from Epic tomorrow, so you can ask them. But I think USD, it's on the radar for everyone. Maybe it wasn't a year or two ago, but now it's on everybody's radar. So I can't make promises, but I don't think it's going to be as long as I think it's going to happen sooner than we expect.